Upwards of 60 protesters were arrested. Charges against the officer who apparently accidentally shot Wright are expected to be filed on Wednesday. Officer Kim Potter has resigned from the force. Brooklyn Center Mayor Mike Elliott.
I'm appreciative of the officer, stepping down and saying that, she felt that was the right thing to do, for the community, and I couldn't agree more.
Police Chief Tim Gannon resigned as well. The defense has begun its case in the murder trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin.
The defense is arguing that George Floyd had the inclination not to fully comply with police, even has a history of taking drugs while in police custody. It begins after George Floyd did comply by taking off his seatbelt, but then things escalate. An officer tells Floyd to spit out what's in his mouth. In court, a paramedic that treated Floyd after that arrest testified that Floyd told her he took 8 or 9 oxycodone or Percocet pills. Floyd was taken to the hospital for what was considered a potentially fatal blood pressure rate of 216/160. The prosecution cross-examined that paramedic, who testified that despite Floyd's drug abuse, his heart rate was fine and he did not die of a heart attack, which is in part what the defense is arguing how Floyd died.
Fox's Matt Finn. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
The vaccine is officially here, and we aren't just talking about the COVID vaccine, but a financial vaccine at Bank Pacific. We may not be doctors, but we can help you with your financial health. Whether to take advantage of today's crazy low rates, or just a local bank that has your back. At Bank Pacific, we want to help make 2021 your best year yet. Because for 66 years, where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Kristen Smart was a college student who vanished after leaving a party in 1996. Now, 25 years later, a suspect has been arrested and charged with suspicion of her murder. San Luis Obispo County, California Sheriff Ian Parkinson says new information and a podcast led them to suspect Paul Flores.
In 2019, we interviewed several witnesses that had not been previously interviewed, and I'll say some of that information came to light through the podcast that many of you are familiar with, that was produced and eventually led to our interviewing that witness.
Flores was a classmate of Kristen Smart's. Police have also arrested his father as an accessory. They're still searching for Smart's remains. Kristen Smart's family calls the news bittersweet. The Food and Drug Administration has temporarily halted inoculations with the Johnson & Johnson coronavirus vaccine after a possibly serious side effect.
The FDA reported that 6 people out of 6.8 million Johnson & Johnson vaccine recipients suffered some form of blood clot. That's 0.000088% of the population that took the shot, which may be why the FDA says this pause may only last for days and not weeks. Still, the decision to halt its use has left some critics positively incandescent. In a statement, former President Donald Trump accused the Biden administration of doing, quote, a terrible disservice to people throughout the world.
Fox's Kevin Corke. South Korea's President Moon Jae-in has told Japan's ambassador that he has serious concerns over Japan's decision to release water from its damaged Fukushima nuclear power plant into the ocean. President Moon also threatening to bring the decision before the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Half a day. Patsy Gogri from Security Title with a real estate tip. A power of attorney can be a useful tool when a buyer or seller cannot be present to sign documents, such as a military member deployed overseas. To mitigate its fraudulent use, your escrow officer will contact the seller to make sure they know their property is being sold. When using a power of attorney, call the professionals at Security Title. we are here to help.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Nicholas. If you are a small business, you may be interested in a federal program called the State Small Business Credit Initiative. This program can provide federal funds to match equity investments into your company or help you get lower interest rates at local banks. To find out more on how this program can help your small business, please contact your Guam Congressional Office at 475-6453 or at michael.sannicolas@mail.house.gov.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the Office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
76 Circle K, the Subaki Tower, and Spa Ayalam bring you another staycation. We are celebrating Mom and all she does. Win a 2-night stay at the luxurious Subaki Tower, get pampered by Spa Ayalam, and enjoy a delicious lunch and dinner at Casa Oceano. All you have to do is purchase $35 or more in 76 fuel and enter to win a staycation fit for a mom. The more you gas, the more chances of winning. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com or any Circle K location for more information.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services. Sunday brunch at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro is back. Come and enjoy Mezcla's true taste of Guam. Open for 2 seatings at 10:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. $28.95 for adults and $14.95 for kids 5 to 11 years old. Call 479-2652 or 2653 for reservations.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Got off to a scratchy start there, but here we are, big as life, twice as ugly. Another episode of the greatest afternoon radio talk show in the Western Pacific, if not the entire Pacific. So let's start out with Zemi Kutney and find out what nonsense the Daily News is spreading today. So the Daily News went for like a year with no local editorials. The ownership changed hands. It's now Kaleo Moylan. And they stumbled forward with a few local editorials last week, but after looking at a couple of them, I think I decided that maybe back in the days of Gannett's News Service boilerplate, those might have been the good old days. No matter where they came from, it seems like the Daily News only wants to write editorials that appear on the left side of the page. Today isn't a whole lot different. We have an editorial writer named Froma Harrop, Harrop. I would probably rather pronounce that Harump. Christine Hostetter is a 4th grade teacher in San Clemente, California. Her husband has been a big promoter of the QAnon conspiracy theory, and she appears to be supporting his lunatic efforts. As the story is being told, liberal parents and students temporarily forced Hostetter's removal from the classroom. In response, local conservatives, villains that they are, have accused them of persecuting a teacher for her political views. But that's not how the story should be told. The real issue isn't her politics. It's whether displays of ignorance make her unqualified for the job. This is a problem of our times when so many Americans embrace beliefs that are not only based on lies, but also crazy. Now, you can see where this is going, can't you, Jose? Yeah. So this is not her politics. These are displays of ignorance, because only ignorant people could believe some things or not reject it promptly. To label these views as mere political opinion is to savage the idea of there being reality. You know, like you're born with the sex you'll always have, like only a man and a woman can get married. Yeah, savage reality, but that's okay if you're doing it from the left. That millions of voters share Hostetter's contention that the 2020 election was stolen from former President Donald Trump does not confer its respectability. Well, on this subject, let's not define these demented talking points as conservative. They're demented. That's unfair to sane conservatives who accepted the election results even when many wished they were otherwise. And it needs repeating that many conservatives found Trump appalling, especially after he fueled the January 6th rampage on the Capitol. Now, going back to the beginning of the editorial here, the issue isn't her politics. It's whether whether displays of ignorance make her unqualified for the job. Unless you buy into the left narrative, you're too ignorant to be a teacher. Hostetter makes an interesting case that she protested against Wuhan virus restrictions was her right. Even if you consider the public health orders necessary, there were defensible arguments for opposing them. Not defensible was Hostetter's public badgering of people who wore masks near her town's beach. Hostetter was in Washington for Trump's heated harangue on the ellipse, during which he denied Joe Biden's win. That event may have been an exercise in group psychosis, but attendees who did not engage in the violent attack that followed broke no laws. So it was okay to go and listen to Trump's speech. Had it been established that Hostetter actually entered the Capitol, she would have been complicit in an insurrection. Yeah, we have to use the word insurrection, although, you know, when a mob of people decide to invade a building and cause a riot, that's not an insurrection. It happens a lot of times after World Series games and football championships. As for implications that she indulges in racism, Hostetter has not been known to voice it. On the contrary, Black and Latina former students say they never heard such ugly sentiments, and they remember her fondly. So there's got to be something wrong with her here. That others in her right-wing circles hold such repugnant views need not reflect on her. But Alan Hostetter, Christine's husband, has gained some fame as a promoter of dangerous QAnon idiocy, and in this she's helped him. QAnon advances the theory that a secret cabal of Democrats runs a global child sex trafficking ring, and also that God sent Trump to save American civilization. Allen, who founded the American Phoenix Project, apparently holds that Wuhan virus doesn't exist. Back here to QAnon. QAnon advances the theory that a secret cabal of Democrats runs a global sex trafficking ring, and they started riots and looting and vandalism that took place in almost all major U.S. cities all last summer. Did you see that, Jose? All of those QAnon riots?
every day was January 6th.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't see a single QAnon riot.
Zero.
Yeah, but anyone who would entertain the theory, and I have good friends who live in the D.C. area, and they were pretty interested in QAnon because, as they understand it, it is a prediction process. That if you know where to look, there are QAnon predictions. And it sounded pretty interesting to me. So having said that now, I'm obviously too stupid to teach school. If I decided I wanted to go back and teach at George Washington, I would be too dumb. Back to Alan Hostetler. On January 5, Alan Hostetler publicly called for executing politicians who allegedly plotted against Trump. The FBI was so alarmed by his cry for war tomorrow against vipers in Congress who refused to overturn the election results that it raided Hostetler's house. Yeah, I guess maybe Hostetler shouldn't be a teacher. Now, this, of course, this is the era, where women stand alone. Women are not functions of their marriage. They have an independent existence completely apart from their husbands. The evidence that Christine has joined him in this bizarre talk, what is she saying, is not a slam dunk. But it's pretty troubling that she sat on the stage with him as he pushed the paranoia, more so that she was listed as the chief financial officer of the organization and has raised money for it. Perhaps more disturbing is that she personally peddled the stolen election lie. Wow. We're allowing people like this to teach in our schools?
We did after Hillary lost.
Yeah. Doesn't she know anything about political correctness? You have to wonder whether she's so intellectually challenged that she believes it. But if she knows it's a falsehood and it threatens our democracy, then she lacks the character to influence children. Again, the concern does not revolve around some ordinary political disagreement. This is something that the left has taken a position on. It's around whether people endorsing beliefs so divorced from reality can be trusted to teach children. I think they should be kept away from classrooms. Farop, is it where Froma, Harap? I think you should be kept away from the newspaper because you come forward and are everything that you purport to hate. A woman is not entitled to decide on her own what she believes in and what she doesn't believe in. She's certainly not entitled to anything like freedom of speech, even though there's nothing that says that she's not a good teacher. Just because she doesn't believe in the same garbage you believe in, you're saying, I think she should be kept away from classrooms. It's around whether people endorsing beliefs so divorced from reality can be trusted to teach. and Daily News at Kaleo, I'm wondering now whether someone so divorced from what a newspaper is supposed to be like should be allowed to own a newspaper. Get with the program. Wow, This may have been a new low for the Daily News. She talks about things that I disagree with. Her husband is an officer in an organization I don't like. Therefore, she doesn't comprehend enough to be a teacher. All right, let's go from there to the Post. The Post did a pretty good job today. I'd say, I would say the Post is half right or maybe 3/4 right, but they're not wrong, not like the Daily News. And here's the headline in the Post editorial. Discovery of ancestral remains should not be treated with secrecy. And I would reword the headline, Government business should not be treated with secrecy. I don't care what it deals with. In July 2015, a moving ceremony was held to rebury the remains of 10 Guam ancestors who lived in the 1400s. The ancestral remains were discovered during the earth digging for the construction of the Ladzone landfill in, I'm going to pronounce this correctly now, in Alahan. Yeah, I probably would have said in Alahan anyhow, even before Tello worked her magic at the legislature. And the remains were moved to a new memorial site along Dandan Road. A traditional Chamorro ceremony. Now, how do we know what a traditional Chamorro ceremony was, including prayers and chants? You know, I know what a Catholic funeral looks like. I've been to Catholic. I know what a Catholic Mass looks like. But I don't know what traditional Chamorro ceremony, including prayers and chants, look like. And I would bet dollars to donuts that there isn't anybody else on the island who does. I suspect there are several who wish they could present that as authentic, but no one can.
Neo-traditional or acceptable ceremony, but traditional, it's
right.
reaching.
What it might have been, or what we would really like it to have been, yeah. There was no visible controversy in how the remains were reburied, a bit farther from the site where the landfill now sits. The ancestors, according to the memorial plaque, once farmed the land near where they were found in their initial graves. There was no protest expressing how the ancestors' remains were treated during the Ladzone landfill project discovery. It should be noted that the federal court, under the hawkish watch of District Court Chief Judge Francis Tydenko Gatewood, saw to it that the Ladzone landfill project and related activities are done the right way as part of a federal receivership over the local government's management of solid waste. Probably should say mismanagement of solid waste, yeah. Now, I'll just take the Post at their word, although if they wanted to enhance their credibility here, since a judicial proceeding was involved, they should have asked Josh Tenorio, who used to work at the Superior Court. He kind of knows how things work around the court. We bring up the 2015 reburial ceremony in light of the recent secrecy and controversy surrounding the discovery of other ancestral remains, this time at the construction site of facilities for nearly 5,000 Marines who will be relocated to Guam from Okinawa. At first, the government of Guam officials and the military would not even confirm the discovery of the ancestral remains. I don't think the military really had much of a role in this. Because in the beginning, it was the SHPO who never even mentioned it, and it was the SHPO, not the military, who said, well, you know, it's not complete yet, and all of this falderall about the architect hasn't completed his study. It wasn't the military. Governor Lilian Guerrero, as you were, with the governor's recent stance, this has changed, and she deserves credit for the move to transparency. No, she doesn't. She deserves enmity for allowing an absence of transparency to exist in her administration from the get-go. And it hasn't been a secret. Governor Lilian Guerrero recently urged Carlotta Leon Guerrero, I think it's more like ordered Carlotta Leon Guerrero, the acting state historic preservation officer, better known as the SHPO, to disclose what the latter knows about the ancestral remains that were found in the Marine Corps base project in Dedido. Carlotta Leon Guerrero previously took a stance that the authority to disclose such records belongs to the U.S. Department of Defense or the Department of Interior. No, she didn't. Her first stance was, in the face of a Sunshine Law request, I can't release that because federal law says. So when the Vigilance Committee said, what authority do you have to enforce federal law? Well, it turns out she didn't have any authority to advance federal law. Then she alluded to what the federal policy was, and the Vigilance Committee has now asked, well, let's see the papers that the federal authorities sent to you then, Carlotta. It's going to be interesting to see which version of the Organic Act Carlotta sends to the Vigilance Committee. Are you listening, Talina? Last week, the governor wrote to Carlotta, I urge you to share any information you may have about the discoveries to the extent permissible under the law. And she laid it all out. And apparently that was the extent of permissible law. There's an old saying when a bunch of guys get together, I kind of remember this from the old days. Bunch of guys get together around the corner of the bar, and each of them have had a couple of brews, and you start telling stories about some of your experiences and things like that. And there's a rule that applies in that case that applies here. First lawyer ain't got a chance. As you were, first liar ain't got a chance. And that's what we're talking about here. First liar doesn't have a chance. I urge you to share any information you may have about the discoveries to the extent of permissible under law. And, of course, when Anamita Carr ran this story in the Daily News, her story said the military deferred to civilian authorities. That's when Carlotta decided, I have to enforce federal law. You want to see my badge? Oh, wait a minute. I don't have a badge, but I'm going to enforce federal law anyhow. Okay, we now know from the disclosure of information last week that on November 4, 2020, a ceremony was held to decide the discovery of the ancestor remains, and several Guam government representatives were there. The event was attended by the governor, Carlotta Leon Guerrero, GovGuam archaeologist John Mark Joseph. That sounds like a command. John Mark Joseph. Absent or tardy. Historic preservationist Joe Garrido. Now there's a heavyweight. Joe Garrido himself. Vera Topaznia from the governor's office, Community Defense Liaison Office, Rear Admiral John Manoni, and Colonel Bradley McGrath, the first base commander of Marine Corps Base Camp Bloss, were among military representatives at the ceremony. You would want to keep this secret. You wouldn't want the word of this notorious gathering, all of these nefarious creatures. What kind of a conspiracy were they putting together? You certainly wouldn't want the public to know that all of these people gathered together and were maybe talking to one another. All the efforts to keep this discovery and the ensuing ceremony hushed only fueled the fire from the people who are against the military's development of the Marine Corps base and other issues related to the military. And maybe that's the story. Yeah, maybe that's what Carlotta had in mind. I'll play hide the ball and, kind of rile up the troops up there. Maybe the natives will become restless, so to speak. There is a way to move forward when the remains of Guam ancestors from more than 1,000 years ago are found as part of the development within the military fences or on civilian grounds. The Department of Defense already is providing $12 million for planning, design, construction, and commissioning of a Guam cultural repository for artifacts that will be unearthed during the military construction projects. Perhaps some of the press releases that Carlotta didn't send out will go into that cultural repository. Or some of the demands for public records she got from the Vigilance Committee. A proper burial ceremony in keeping with local traditions to pay respect to the dead, just like the 2015 tribute in Dandan, should be embraced and shared with the public. Most Guam residents understand the delicate balance between respecting and preserving the legacy of our ancestors and taking a path forward with the development of facilities for national security and for Guam's economic security with respect to the civilian projects. There is no need to keep the discovery of Guam's ancestral remains secret. If anything, Guam's younger generation should have more opportunities to learn from them. Well, I said the editorial was at least half right. They're right on the point that they're making. But the bigger point is we should not tolerate this kind of BS in our government, Governor. There was no reason whatsoever for Carlotta Leon Guerrero, SHPO or no SHPO, to not answer those Sunshine Law requests. And if you stop and think about it, Governor, your job is this. Your job is to put the Vigilance Committee out of business. To when we got to the point that where we said this government is so open and so willing to publish everything that we need to know about everything that we want to know, not what we need to know, about the operation of our government, there's really no need for a Vigilance Committee anymore. But as long as you tolerate stuff like this and what's going on at the Land Trust Commission and what's going on at the airport and what's going on at the police department, you're going to have a lot of the Post is going to have a lot of editorials to write about this. Now, a little depth on this, I'm going to read from something that ran in the PDN on the 9th. Let me take a break here. On the 9th of April.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Off a day. This is Rocky Martinez, professional heavyweight MMA fighter. Nothing gets in my way when I go pro at Subway. Pack a punch with double the protein on any foot-long sub for just $2 more. For a limited time only. Subway. Eat fresh.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so here we are. I'm still talking about the governor and her tolerating a lack of transparency on the part of people in her cabinet. Carlotta Leon Guerrero, also known as the SHPO. And Carlotta finally got caught, in her scheme of not turning something loose that it's not a military secret. It's not sensitive. It's not embarrassing to anybody personally except Carlotta Leon Guerrero now because of the ham-fisted way she handled it. So it was just one of those, well, I'm going to withhold this information. Want to know why? Because I can. I'm going to show you guys how much power I have by not turning this over. See my name tag? I'm the SHPO. So that's where the editorial is half right by saying, yeah, this is good, but it's half wrong by commending the governor, because we should never get to this point in the first place. Governor, you'll need to send out a one-paragraph note that says when you get a Sunshine Law request you had better answer it. You better provide the documents unless you have a darn good reason. And I want to see the darn good reason before you communicate with the person that demanded that information, because this is not some little niggling thing that keeps you from doing the important part of your work. This is the important part of your work. We all work for the people, is what you ought to be saying, Governor. But, of course, you're not.
This isn't an isolated incident. This is not the only agency that tries to run away from transparency.
Absolutely
It's
not. As I
cultural in this
mentioned, it's the
agency.
Land Trust Commission, it's the airport, who's never answered their FOIAs.
GPD.
Yeah, the CCU, and on and on and on. And, you know, the governor can set the tone by just letting it be known that I'm not going to tolerate this. And if someone, if one of the agency heads or ones of boards or commissions doesn't live up to the promise of the Sunshine Law, then she should at least scold them in public. Now, if there were any judicial proceedings, of course, that she wouldn't have jurisdiction over that. Her lieutenant governor, who used to work at the court, would have jurisdiction over that. Okay, going on this very same subject, I'm going back to the Daily News and the story that ran on April 9. Oversight hearing with State Historic Preservation Office. Wait a minute, it's not the article I'm looking for. Hold on a second. I don't have the article. What I was going to do is read Dave Lotz's letter to the editor that ran way back over a week ago, talking about the FOIA that he had submitted, which was ignored. That and now the governor has produced the very same material. Pity that I didn't bring that along. That was a pretty good piece of information. Okay, so much for Zemi Ikotny. Let's turn now to the card. And my program notes. Once again, we have Steve Ignacio, who leads off the card. He doesn't need to have an opponent. His opponent, I think, is existence. And then we go down. We've got Carlotta was hiding the ball even from Therese Terlahi, and now even the Post has blown the whistle on her. Tom Shea and Mariana Leon Guerrero haven't come forward in the face of the latest BLM scandal, and I've got more on that today. And Frank Blas tees off on Mike San Nicolas. And I may get to spend a little more time with Julian Uggan and his new pen pals. Okay, so here's the latest on Steve. GPD closes Jerry Kitchen investigation. Attorney General takes over. The Guam Police Department's investigation into the red Jeep crashing into Jerry Kitchen, known as Jeepgate, has concluded, and the case has been forwarded to the Office of the Attorney General, according to police spokesman Paul Tapau. The Office of the Attorney General has received parts of the report, according to Public Information Officer Katlina Chotfris. The Office of the Attorney General has received parts of the report while still waiting for others. So Paul says, yeah, we sent it to the Attorney General. Now, here's how things work. Police usually initiate criminal prosecutions by arresting someone. And when a person is arrested, the police fill out some papers. The papers are forwarded to the Attorney General. If the Attorney General thinks that there is probable cause to detain that person, he would be detained. He would be brought before a magistrate. Conditions of release would be set, etc., and the prosecution would put together a case. If the police don't arrest, they could still forward a report to the Attorney General for the Attorney General to determine whether or not there should be an arrest and a prosecution. Doesn't happen very often. Ordinarily, it's the cases resulting from an arrest that go to the Attorney General. Now, at least in other administrations, the Attorney General has had his own investigators who also have the powers of arrest and could initiate a criminal prosecution from the Attorney General's office. But the norm, is that if there is a police report that arguably gives rise to the possibility of a criminal prosecution, it would be forwarded to the Attorney General. So when you read in the paper that the report was forwarded to the Attorney General, that doesn't mean that the chief of police is ducking out from it, that he doesn't want to deal with it anymore. Although, given the way Steve has handled his office, that isn't an outrageous assumption. It's the norm. So the papers, now the Paul Tapao has said, yeah, we forwarded all those papers to the Attorney General. And then the public information officer for the Attorney General, Katlina Chatfrus, says the Attorney General has received parts of the report while they still wait for others. Now, once again, I go back to how the chief set the tone for this entire investigation when he said, I have no information, even from the get-go, that there was a cover-up in this crash. So we're wondering what parts of the investigation were not forwarded to the Attorney General. Maybe the parts dealing with the cover-up that never existed. Maybe the part dealing with the reason that the police officer didn't write a ticket for reckless driving. It's hard to say, but Paul Tapao, when you say it's been forwarded to the Attorney General, that there ought to be some accuracy in that. Now, if you only sent part of it, you should have said that. And then, of course, the questions would be, well, why didn't you send it all? What parts didn't you send? And those are my questions. Why didn't you send it all? And what parts didn't you send? Because the suspicion is you didn't want to send the embarrassing parts to the Attorney General. Katlina goes on to say, with any case, we'll review police reports, conduct additional investigation if necessary, and determine whether the evidence establishes that a criminal offense is committed and can be prosecuted under law. We will keep the public apprised of our review and movement. Well, that's a refreshing take, if any, in this case, while preserving the integrity of the review and any potential investigation. Chatfrus added, although he is still waiting to receive insurance money, owner Jerry Lee began rebuilding his restaurant. Police cited the driver of the red Jeep that crashed into Jerry Kitchen for imprudent driving. Imprudent driving means the driver of the car either misstepped on the accelerator or drove inattentively, according to Tapao. Inattentive driving.
Keep your eyes open.
Yeah. Video captured the Jeep heading northbound on Marine Corps Drive, passing other vehicles and crossing over the southbound lanes, then going airborne in the parking lot prior to colliding into the business. An off-duty police department officer was with the passengers in the vehicle, Tapao said. So only part of the report was sent to the Attorney General. Maybe it was too heavy to do in one trip.
They couldn't get it airborne.
They couldn't get it airborne, yeah. All right, let's see. I probably got Paul Tapao on the line here. No, it's Pete. Or is it repeat?
It's the same Pete, so repeat.
It's a repeat from Pete, right? Hello, Pete.
Hello, Uncle Bob. How you doing?
Doing great, Pete.
All right. Any new complaints from the real Joe?
From the real Joe Cruz? No.
Yeah.
No, I suspect that he's probably lawyered up in the face of a Joseph F. Cruz. I think there's probably an intellectual property litigation lying there somewhere, Pete.
Yeah, I called because I was listening to you talk about the FOIA, and I was a FOIA certified officer for the military, and our process was anytime a FOIA request came in, you had to, first of all, reply to the requester and let them know, whether or not, first of all, you were the releasing authority for the documents requested, and whether it met the standards. And then, if it did, then you had to tell them, how long it would take for release with redactions. And then when the redactions were going to occur, it had to have at least 3 different officers look at the redactions to certify that they were proper redactions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Invoking the proper sections of the statute. And if that wasn't complied, then, the person was subject to sanctions.
Sure.
For attorney's costs and all that. So I'm just wondering, I admittedly am not as familiar with the Sunshine Act, the local analog, but is there any teeth like what the federal FOIA?
The teeth in our local statute is litigation lying with the person who demanded the records and from whom they were wrongfully withheld. A suit lies in the Superior Court if the person who demanded the documents prevailed. He's entitled to costs, attorneys fees, and the government official who withheld the documents is potentially liable for a $1,000 fine.
Oh, so but has anyone ever tried to enforce that?
As a matter of fact, yes. I'm very familiar with the first guy that actually enforced that. There have been a couple of others since that time. But I think you were probably still in the Army when we were in the middle of what I refer to as the Wars of Bishop Succession, in which Anthony Apperon fell. Anthony Apperon had, in my reading, given a deed in fee simple to the neo-catechumenal way for the property in Jonia. And a certificate of title was issued, and there's a long story behind that also, that was erroneous and was corrected, and the corrections were more erroneous than the original certificate. And I was involved with several FOIAs to get the documents underlying what I alleged was misconduct. And the director of land management at the time, Michael Bora, stonewalled, and I filed suit, prevailed, attorney's fees, costs, and Michael Bora wound up ponying up $1,000.
Oh, wow. That's great to know. So, maybe that's what needs to happen, because since I've been back, I've been hearing that a lot of Sunshine Act requests have just been ignored and nothing's ever happened to anybody.
Yeah, well, it's not that easy to find, You know, to find the money, you got to front the money for the attorney. And I think it took 8 or 9 months for me to get to the end of my case, when ordinarily this information that people who do FOIAs are looking for is perishable. If you don't get it, you know, reasonably quickly, it's perhaps not all that valuable to you in whatever it is that you're trying to use it for. But, yeah. But Chief Ignacio has been stuck with it. Joey Duenas and the CCU has been slammed with it. So it's there and it works. And what I'm hoping is that the Vigilance Committee might be able to set up sort of a militancy fund, so when people stiff them, it would be with the expectation that they're going to file suit. Either that or the newspapers get together and fund that kind of litigation.
Or maybe the ACLU.
Well, you know, they don't really get involved with things like the First Amendment. They're too preoccupied with other things, right, Pete?
Yeah. All right. That's good information. Thanks for that, Uncle Bob. Appreciate it.
Okay. Talk to you later, Peter.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's take a short break here, and then I'm going to come back and find out how the Sunshine Law works inside a drive-through.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Nicholas. If you are a small business, you may be interested in a federal program called the State Small Business Credit Initiative. This program can provide federal funds to match equity investments into your company or help you get lower interest rates at local banks. To find out more on how this program can help your small business, please contact your Guam Congressional Office at 475-6453 or at michael.sanicolas@mail.house.gov.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the Office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tumon is back with all your mezcla favorites, like oxtail kadu, Kahlua pig and cabbage, and Chef Peter's style black stew frittata. Mezcla is ready to welcome back everyone with great service in a safe and friendly environment. Come on down and visit Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tumon, located on the first floor lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel. Open for lunch from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and for dinner from 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. Call 969-2652 for reservations. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Okay, so we're going to find out how well it works if someone dispatches a Sunshine Law request to a government official while he's in a drive-through at one of our local restaurants, right, Jack?
Yes. Can I get the #1 Whopper meal? And I love the Whopper. Can I get an extra one? Can I get it with extra mayo? Extra mayo for both? Yeah, extra mayo both. And can I get onion rings instead of French fries? Okay. And
this is rich.
Do you want to make it a medium size or a large? Large. Okay. Yeah. And do you still get the reward points? No, we don't. We just continue the reward points. Oh, man. Okay. Well, thank you. So I'll just pull it. It goes to me 11. Okay, thank you.
Jack, are you finished with ordering your meal there at the drive-thru?
Oh, yeah. Today's Whopper Wednesday. So I get an extra Whopper. And my best friend down here, the Bloodhound, the Basset Hound, Icon down here in Tumon's down here, so I guess I'll share one. I shouldn't maybe, but I always see it down here, so I'll give it some.
Well, remember,
How you
Jack.
doing, Bob?
Remember, man is the dog's best friend.
Yes, I think the most interesting question about the FOIA, and I think you should see this. What happened? Did it have to go through? I mean, did the police report have to go through Jack Haggett first for corrections before it went on to the AG's office?
I think that the chief wrote it up and showed it to Jack, and Jack kind of leaned on him really heavy to change the police report. But then the chief said, "No, I'm not going to do that because it might be against the law." And Jack said, "Well, here, let me have that police report." And he added his own information on the bottom of it, and then sent it off to the Attorney General.
He ordered his own Whopper.
And then he ordered his own Whopper. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been interesting these past couple of weeks, and I don't know whether leaving the AG is going to do anything about it. There's just a lot of balls in the air right now, and thank you very much. And so yeah, I'm just wondering.
You're just wondering when you're going to get your meal, or?
I already got it. So,
okay.
I was just wondering what would be the next step. Is there still an oversight hearing on this thing, or has that been done?
On Jerry Kitchen?
Yes.
I think it's over. I think they had it, didn't they, Jose?
It received 3 Michelin stars.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah, some of the best Chinese food in the Pacific Basin, if you can get it.
I'm going to make an annotation. I'm going to steal that one from Jose. And, it what he says, it's one of those commandments that we shall not do. So
right.
I'll give credit to Jose for that one.
Okay.
I'm going to keep that one on in my holster. But, yeah, and it's just I want to support our police department. I know, but it's these kinds of things that happen. I really don't know how to address this. I mean, the police force, our doctors, where do we turn for information, guidance, for security, for some sort of safety?
Well, of course, you mean other than tall tales when you're talking about guidance, right?
But you're off during the weekends.
I know. You got to work.
But
on
anyways, I also wanted to say that I listened to you, and I really like the format for this broadcast because I'm able to score 3 radio stations on one channel. So I get the point, and the other 3 choice channels. But I was hoping that if Jose can pass the word along, that if they could also sign up over at Radio Garden. It's a free broadcast and stuff like that, and that's what I use when I go off island to keep a track of what's going on here in Guam. But for some reason, the point it isn't on there, but the boss is. So if you can pass that on to, thank you very much. If you can pass that on to who's ever in charge of formats and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
could you ask the server there at the drive-thru if she could pass it? Oh, no. I'll ask Jose instead.
You could also download the Odyssey app, which used to be called radio.com, AUDACY, and we are on there, all 3 stations from choice.
Yeah, because I listen to you on TuneIn, but for some reason I upgraded it, and it runs ads when I use my 3G, but it doesn't run ads when I use the Wi-Fi. So it's backwards, and so I just wanted to see if you guys would carry the Radio Garden.
Maybe you could shoot a signal to Ray, mentioning that none other than Drive-Thru Jack has requested this.
Yeah,
okay.
So, anyways, Bob, I'm listening to you, and I have my dinner. I have my dinner for the dog down here, too. So, yeah, I'll be listening in.
Okay, thanks for calling, Jack.
All right.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Charges could come today. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Against the Minnesota police officer who shot and killed 20-year-old Dante Wright during a traffic stop on Sunday. Officer Kim Potter has quit the force.
With Mayor Mike Elliott calling for her firing, both she and Chief Tim Gannon resigned. Potter's resignation letter reads in part, I have loved every minute of being a police officer, but I believe it is in the best interest of the community, the department, and my fellow officers if I resign.
Fox's Mike Tobin. More violent protests in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota last night.
There were those that decided to come out and throw bricks, a light here, alcohol bottles, cans, and other items at law enforcement officers.
Booker Hodges of the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. Upwards of 60 demonstrators were arrested. More Minnesota National Guard troops are being mobilized as the protests continue and in preparation for the end of Derek Chauvin's murder trial. Closing arguments in it are expected next week. Off the coast of Louisiana, a race against time and the weather.
Stormy conditions and 75-mile-an-hour wind gusts forcing at least one boat to capsize near Grand Isle. That boat had 18 people on board. A Coast Guard spokesman saying 6 had been rescued as of Tuesday night. The search continues for others, although the Coast Guard says it doesn't know how many people are actually still in the water. Multiple Good Samaritan vessels are assisting in the search. The Coast Guard says it will use helicopters if conditions force them to abandon the search by sea.
Fox's Chris DeMeo. The White House announcing the pullout of U.S. forces in Afghanistan will be complete by September 11th, the 20th anniversary of the attacks on the U.S. that led to what's been called America's longest war. And President Biden will speak to a joint session of Congress 2 weeks from today, just before his 100th day in office. America is listening to Fox News.
The vaccine is officially here, and we aren't just talking about the COVID vaccine, but a financial vaccine at Bank Pacific. We may not be doctors, but we can help you with your financial health. Whether to take advantage of today's crazy low rates, or just a local bank that has your back. At Bank Pacific, we want to help make 2021 your best year yet. Because for 66 years, where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
A House committee is expected today to move forward a bill that could make Washington, D.C. the country's 51st state.
D.C.'s delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton says today the House Oversight Committee will mark up and vote on her bill that would make the district the 51st state in the Union. The House passed the bill last year, but Republicans, which had a majority in the Senate, killed it. Norton says making D.C. a state would right a monumental wrong, denying more than 700,000 taxpayers who live there fair representation. If it were to become a state, they would have one House member and 2 senators. Republicans have accused Democrats of attempting a power grab here. The bill would require 60 votes in the Senate to move forward, which is considered highly unlikely. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
The Biden administration's climate envoy, John Kerry, is headed to China to try and convince the leaders there to reduce their carbon emissions. China is the world's largest emitter of fumes from burning coal and petroleum. 25 years after she disappeared, suspicion of murder charges have been filed in the Kristen Smart case.
Paul Flores, the last person to be seen with Kristen Smart, and his father, Ruben, are being held in connection with her disappearance and death.
Paul was arrested for charge of murder with zero bail, meaning he is unable to bail. And Ruben Flores was arrested as an accessory to murder with a bail of $250,000.
San Luis Obispo County Sheriff Ian Parkinson says an exhaustive investigation and much evidence led to the arrests. But unfortunately,
we have not recovered Kristen.
He says that search continues. Kristen's family, in a statement, said this day was a first step in bringing her home. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Students at a North Texas high school are being disciplined after officials there discovered they conducted a mock slave auction of black classmates online. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Half a day, this is Honey. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more global markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated teams in Guam, Saipan, and on U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
Listen to The Point. Any speaker, anytime. Check us out on your FM radio at 93.3, 104.3 HD3, thepoint.gu, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and tune in. And announcing radio.com. Download the app and hear The Point. Get the latest news, sports, entertainment, and more. On demand. Your phone is digital. Your life is digital. And we are too. 93.3, The Point.
Big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community, yet national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
So here we are back again, second half after that great halftime show. And during a halftime show, I happened to notice something that Peter Santos posted. New items at Jerry Kitchen. Shattered glass noodles. Red Jeep curry chicken. Imprudent roast duck. I hope Drive-Thru Jack is listening. That's a pretty attractive menu.
Free crow.
Free crow. Okay, well, during the halftime, I was able to locate that letter from Dave Lotz that I wanted to read right after I read today's editorial, which, as you'll recall, was the Post commending the governor for calling Carlotta Leon Guerrero's bluff and telling her to do her job. It was the right thing to do, but I disagreed with any kind of commendation for the governor, because you shouldn't tolerate this kind of stuff, as the chief would say, from the get-go. She should send a strong message. Don't do that. And I had this message from Dave Lotz, this letter to the editor from Dave Lotz on April 9, letter to the Daily News, which I think is a smoking gun. Because when the story came out in the Daily News over Anamita Carr's byline, Carlotta said, I can't release that stuff. She just said, I can't release it because, and she cited a federal statute. The same story said that the military deferred to Carlotta. So then a FOIA to Carlotta asking how she had the authority to interpret or to enforce that federal statute, etc. And then, well, as you were, first FOIA to Carlotta, how about letting this stuff go? And she says, I can't because of federal law, sort of implying that she was to enforce federal law, and it wasn't her, it was the feds that wouldn't let her do it. So that's the sticking point here. Then along comes Dave Lotz's letter, and it reads like this: Governor, as you were, Gov Guam must be transparent on burials found on Camp Blas. Guam's acting state historic preservation officer, Carlotta Leon Guerrero, has refused to release information of the condition of burials discovered at the former site of the Chamorro village of Magua during construction at Camp Blas, and then instead transferred the matter to the Navy to decide. I don't think that's actually what happened, but it's okay. Carlotta has stated that 54 United States Code 307-103 has the legal device to prevent the people of Guam from learning about the destruction of heritage. So let's take a look at 54 U.S.C. 307-103. As I will summarize, it's easily located on the internet. This section of the United States Code is procedural in that a federal agency is required to consult with the Secretary of the Interior of both the federal agency, which is the Navy in this instance, and the Secretary of Interior determine that disclosure of cultural resource information may cause, 1, an invasion of privacy, 2, risk harm to the historic property, 3, impede in traditional religion's use of the site. Recognizing that there should be a paper trail to this process, not too long ago I filed a Freedom of Information request with the National Park Service, the agency of the Department of the Interior responsible for this information. The request was specifically for any information regarding 54 U.S.C. 307-103 regarding Navy requests for Guam. The response, dated February 24, from the individual assigned to locate the record, states, I have not found anyone who has found responsive records. With no records at the National Park Service, the only conclusion that I can currently draw is that the process was not followed, and therefore refusal to release information on our island's heritage to the people of Guam based on 54 U.S.C. 307-13 is erroneous and a violation of the Guam Freedom of Information law, not to mention being untruthful. Oh, it's not me, it's the feds. However, just because the documents will surface to substantiate this decision to deny the people the information of what our government is doing relative to protecting or not protecting our heritage. In either case, the government of Guam officials are obligated to be transparent in making their decisions, as they are supposed to represent the interests of us. Our acting state historic preservation officer should be leading the effort to insist this information be made public. But she turned it down, first of all, on her own hook, then because it was federal law, and now Dave Lotz, good going, Dave, has pulled the curtain back, the curtain that says federal official on it, denial of requests. Dave Lotz pulls the curtain back, and there's nothing behind that curtain, not even a little toto, not a thing. So very good, Dave Lotz, and very bad, Carlotta Leon Guerrero. Okay, let's see, where was I with the card here? Having a hard time keeping track of my papers today. Okay, I think we go next to the facts concerning Black Lives Matter. And the local dimension here is this. Once again, if you've forgotten, not long after George Floyd died, a group of doctors and other medical professionals went to Skinner Plaza to put on a show, a demonstration. They all wore white coats, and they presented themselves as a group called White Coats for Black Lives Matter. And they very respectfully knelt on the ground at Skinner Plaza for 8 minutes and 57, say 8 hours. Yeah. And they were, they wanted to show their solidarity with Black Lives Matter, etc. I gigged them pretty hard when it happened. I said, what you guys are doing, you're just virtue signaling. You're just showing off is what you're doing. And at that time, we already knew that Black Lives Matter was more interested in rioting, looting, and arson than they were in doing anything to help people of, as they would say, people of color. Yesterday, I read a workup of how one of the three founders of Black Lives Matter, a self-identified Marxist named Patrisse Cullors, had spent $3.2 million on real property, including $1.5 million house for herself. And a lot of the Black Lives Matter folks were pretty angry. Black Lives Matter was able to raise $90 million. And, of course, we can only wonder where it went. We know where at least $3.5 million of it went. And then, there's the latest Black Lives Matter initiative in Minneapolis. Backing up a little bit, we know that George Floyd died in Minneapolis, when was it, last year, and that he died after he was arrested by 3 white police officers. Now, I have to stop here and remind you that if you are engaged in anti-racism, not just being not racist is not good enough. You must be an anti-racist, and to engage in anti-racism, to be an anti-racist, you must embrace critical race theory. And critical race theory holds that whatever factual basis there is for any particular situation, it's all relative and not very important. What's really important is who is the oppressor, who is the oppressed, and what is the narrative of the oppressed. Well, in the George Floyd matter, the oppressor was a white police officer named Derek Chauvin and 2 other police officers, one of which was not white, but we kind of gloss over that a little bit. And the narrative is that George Floyd was a heroic man who was innocent as the driven snow. What actually happened was that George Floyd drove up to a convenience store with his drug dealer in the car. Drug dealer tried to spend a counterfeit $20 bill, couldn't do it, gave it to George. George tried. And when he passed the counterfeit 20, the cops were called. The cops wanted to take him into custody. George, who had taken 3 times a lethal dose of fentanyl and also had methamphetamine in his system, would not comply with the police, what the police wanted him to do, acted out, etc. Police officers subdued him by laying him on the ground. One of the police officers put his knee on Floyd's shoulder, which is according to Minneapolis police training guidance, and Floyd died. There's good reason to believe that he died of a heart attack, perhaps influenced by what's called excited delirium and the high amount of fentanyl in his system. Those may have been the facts. Now, the prosecution in the case has its own version of facts, which are credible. There's going to be some tough fact-finding to do here. But if you want to be recognized as an anti-racist, you don't pay any attention to what I said or what the prosecution said. The critical race theory holds that the white police officer was the oppressor, George Floyd was the oppressed. Therefore, looking at Floyd's narrative and all of the hardship that black Americans have had going back to 1615, you must punish the oppressor and you must do what you can to enshrine the struggle of the oppressed. And the way that was accomplished in Minneapolis was to set a police station on fire, to engage in widespread looting, arson, and rioting, all in the name of critical race theory. The governor and the mayor of Minneapolis, at least initially, condoned all these things. The city council of Minneapolis entertained a defund the police motion. You know, this is all the police fault. But, you know, they've kind of had a change of heart now because the crime rates in Minneapolis have gone through the roof since they've lowered the amount of money they've spent on police. And so, since so many police said, you think I'm going to continue to do this job with the way the city government is acting? I'm out of here. So a lot of cops have retired from Minneapolis. Well, the latest thing now is that a guy named Dante Wright was shot by a police officer. And Dante Wright was shot because after he arrested, instead of succumbing to the cops who arrested him, he got back into his car and drove away. And after he got back into his car and was in the process of driving away, a Minneapolis police officer shot him. He drove down the street and crashed, and he was dead. So that's what happened. So I've explained to you. That's all you need to know. I forgot to give you the important element. The cop was white. Dante is an African-American. He's black. Therefore, it's the cop's fault, and it's time to start the fires in Minneapolis again. That's critical race theory. So the chief of police came out and said, we got a good idea. We had the body cams here. And even the arresting officer or the shooting officer said, I used my taser instead of my pistol. Now, a little research will show that cops in this suburban city in Minnesota called Brooklyn Heights. Why anybody would name a suburb Brooklyn, I don't know. Anyhow, especially in Minnesota. I don't think that there's a suburb in New York called Minneapolis Heights, but that's another story. So the way police officers carry those things is that the firearm is on the dominant side of the police officer. The taser is on the other side. So since the cop was right-handed, the pistol was on her right side and the taser was on her left side. And she hollered, taser, taser, I'm going to tase you. And instead of pulling the taser out with her left hand, she went with her right hand, pulled out her pistol, and shot young Dante, after which she said, oh, shucks, I shot him. So the chief of police, laid this all out, and he said, this was a tragedy, but it was an accidental shooting. And, of course, the necessary expressions of sorrow. When the city manager was asked, well, aren't you going to fire him now? And the city manager says, well, we can't just fire him. We've got to give him due process of law. For that outrageous statement, he was fired. Yeah, I mean, anybody knows that when a black man is shot by a white man, there can be no due process. That's all you need to know. So, so the city council put the mayor in charge of the police department. He's probably going to come right out and say, we don't need no stinking due process around here. So here's an article that Matt Walsh ran in The Wire. Over 500 white people have been killed by cops since 2020. There has been no rioting over these deaths. Black Lives Matter militants smashed police cars, assaulted police officers, vandalized police stations, and looted local businesses in Minneapolis on Sunday night. Village video footage shows the pillagers ransacking shoe stores, auto parts retailers, pharmacies, dollar stores, and even pizza restaurants. Well, I think when this happened in Chicago, one of the looters said, "It's reparations, baby." Yeah. As we learned in recent months, no ointment can numb the pain of systemic racism quite like an armful of stolen merchandise. The thing that caused the latest round of rioting is, as always, the depravity and moral degeneracy of the rioters themselves. I don't think you can say that. I think you have to say the systemic racism in the Brooklyn Heights Police Department because a white cop shot a black person. The thing that caused this latest round of rioting is, as always, the depravity and moral degeneracy of the rioters themselves. But the ostensible excuse for the chaos is the death of a man named Daunte Wright, who was shot and killed by Brooklyn Center police during a traffic stop earlier in the afternoon. Not many details were available about the incident, and body cam footage had not been released when the riots began. They knew what they needed to know. The details never matter to the rioters. Black Lives Matter has its narrative, which is always the same narrative and adjusted only to include the few sketchy and superficial details. Tom and Mariana, do you want to go down to Skinner Plaza and hold a press conference and say, I really acted in haste and Black Lives Matter is not worth the support of anybody. I don't care what color his coat is. It's mob violence. It's everything that Black Americans have categorically been against. It's lynching without a rope is what it amounts to. All right. Next on the card, got a couple of national items here, is CNN versus Trump. And this is an article that ran in the New York Post. Okay, let's break for the seventh inning stretch, and then I might go to Yankee Stadium here instead of Wrigley Field.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Afade, this is Rocky Martinez, professional heavyweight MMA fighter. Nothing gets in my way when I go pro at Subway. Pack a punch with double the protein on any foot-long sub for just $2 more. For a limited time only. Subway, eat fresh.
So here we are, Yankee Stadium. In Yankee Stadium, the house that Ruth built, except they tore the old Yankee Stadium down, is nothing sacred anymore. Yeah, and the reason we're coming back to Yankee Stadium instead of Wrigley is because I'm dealing with something that ran in the New York Post, which may be one of the very few real newspapers left in the United States. The New York Post, Wall Street Journal, and some of the stuff you can find online. The rest, pretty good for lining your birdcage. You'll recall that the Washington Post broke the story about Hunter Biden's laptop.
New York Post.
I'm sorry, the New York Post.
Yeah, you said Washington.
Yeah,
That's wrong.
boy, how wrong can I be? Yeah. So 5 days after that, the New York Times ran a story critical of the New York Post. and Twitter and Facebook, shut out the Post. Nobody else would run with it. People are saying it was, the guy that ran the store sued, I think it was Twitter, because they said that the laptop had been hacked. And, over on the left, it's all just fake. It's just to hamper Joe Biden running for president. There really is no laptop, etc. What happened? Hunter Biden wrote a book and basically confessed. And he was on TV the other night with Mr. Softball himself, not Mike Wallace, but Mike Wallace's son. Chris Wallace. Yeah.
Oh, he was.
Yeah, we was on with Chris Wallace, and Chris asked him, was it your laptop? And Hunter Biden says, well, there was a laptop, and, maybe it was my laptop. Maybe it wasn't my laptop.
It's difficult when you're in a drug-induced stupor.
Really? And he wrote about all that stuff. So where's the New York Times now coming back and saying, New York Post, you called it, and we covered it up. Yeah, and we don't even have Steve Ignacio on our staff to know when there was a cover-up. So, over here on the right, we're always saying the media is so biased. The mainstream media is just the newsletter service for the Democrat Party. So biased, so hard to the left, so anti-conservative, so anti-Trump. So here's a story that ran in the New York Post. CNN staffer boasts to Project Veritas that the network peddled anti-Trump propaganda. A CNN staffer admitted in a secretly recorded video that his network produced propaganda to oust former President Donald Trump during the 2020 presidential election and bragged about their success. Charlie Chester, a technical director at the cable network, was filmed by an organization called Project Veritas. Now, for you guys that flunk Latin, Veritas, it means the truth. That's when you verify something, you're making sure that it's true. Okay, it was filmed by Project Veritas during a series of fake Tinder dates. In other words, this was set up as Chester explained how they, quote, got Trump out of office. Quote, look what we did. We, and he's bragging here. He's got this female there, and he's bragging, right? Look what we did. We, meaning CNN, got Trump out. I'm 100% going to say it, and I 100% believe that if it wasn't for CNN, I don't know that Trump would have got voted out. So this guy's sure that CNN is why Trump lost. Chester said, adding that he came to work at CNN because he, quote, wanted to be a part of that. Pretty admirable. Here's a guy who's driven by principle. Chester explained how they over-dramatized Trump health issues by bringing in medical experts. Trump's hand was shaking or whatever, I think. We brought in so many medical people to all tell a story that was all speculation, that he was neurologically damaged and he was losing it. He's unfit to, whatever. We were creating a story there that we didn't know anything about. I think that's propaganda, Chester said. Asked by the sleuth if he and CNN were concerned with Joe Biden's health during the election, Chester said the network had that in mind. Quote, showing him jogging in obviously deflection of his age, and they're trying to make it look like, oh, I'm healthy. The girl that was with him said, what do you mean? We would always show shots of him, that's Biden, jogging, and that he's healthy, you know, and him in aviator shades. So, Jose, if you don't have aviator sunglasses, you better get some, right?
It'll shed pounds.
Yeah. Showing him in aviator shades like you paint him as a young geriatric, Chester replied. A source close to CNN said Project Veritas targeted Chester through the dating app Tinder because his profile mentioned he worked at CNN. The Project Veritas employee, who was not identified and claimed to be a nurse, went on 5 dates wearing a wire, including the final one at a coffee shop in Chester's neighborhood. Chester told his date he would be fine with it if Biden died because he thought Vice President Kamala Harris is, the word begins with F and ends in ing, real. I had so many arguments, like my dad would be like, you know, you're voting in Kamala Harris because he's going to die in the presidency, Chester told a woman. And I'm like, he's not going to die, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. She's probably could be a, starts with a B. I can say that one. She could be a bitch like at a board meeting, and you'd hate her as a boss, but she's effing real, better than what we got, regardless. Chester was asked if CNN covered Biden tripping as he walked up the stairs. But you talk about that briefly. You know, they make that a huge story. He said, yeah, we talked about it. We didn't make it a huge story. Now, there's a real irony here. And what happened was this. There's this company, or there's this outfit called Project Veritas that tries to bring a little truth to the public. And they pulled a stunt. They had a lady connect with this guy, Charlie Chester, through an online dating service. And Charlie Chester thought he was out on a date with this lady who was wearing a recording wire. And Charlie Chester, I guess, trying to make an impression on the lady, figured he'd brag a little bit. You know, we over there at CNN, we took down Trump. If it hadn't been for us, Trump probably would have gotten elected. And the New York Post, of course, ran with it. How long do you think it'll be before this appears in the New York Times? Now, the irony is this. There's a guy named David DeLayden who did the same thing with Planned Parenthood and got good videos of Planned Parenthood. He masqueraded as someone who was selling aborted baby parts, he and his confederate. And they got really good video of Planned Parenthood folks and other people shopping for these baby parts like you'd go to a grocery store and squeeze the fruit before you bought it. It's really, really disgusting. He was arrested, sued, and put through hell because of what he did. And in California, he was prosecuted, and one of his main antagonists was the Attorney General of California, a certain Kamala Harris, who brought all of this wrath down on him. And he allegedly had violated some laws dealing with privacy. But, of course, the law that he violated is that you can't say bad things about the abortion industry in California. So that's the irony that I see here. All right, before I go to the next item on the card, I'm going to let another Joe tell us about compact impact agreement and mandatory trash collection.
There's a connection. I'll let him do it.
On the card?
Not on the card.
Not on the card. Well, if it's not on the card, let's save it till the end, and if we got some time on the end, we'll put it in at the end of the card. Okay, next on the card here is Julian Uggan versus the USA. And I got started on this once before, but I don't think I really did it justice. And there's an article in the Daily News by Anumita Carr.
Who is that?
Anumita Carr has the beat that covers the military, the base, the demonstrators, and all that kind of stuff.
The one that most people criticize, most people say, most people talk about.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. Most people are saying, yeah. So I'm gonna start at the beginning here so I can cover it all. As construction for Marine Corps Drive relocation continues, the latest project is underway for an aviation administration building. Members of the United Nations Human Rights Council expressed concern about the growing military presence on Guam. This is wrong. It's just dead wrong. I don't know if it's a mistake or a deliberate distortion, but no members of the United Human Rights Council expressed any concerns about the military presence on Guam at all. The article goes on, while there is no enforcement power behind it, this is the first formal international recognition Guam has received regarding build-up dissent and the island's self-determination, according to Blue Ocean law attorney Julian Uggan. His firm helped submit the appeal to the UN. This is the beginning. It's opening a door, Uggan said. There is a record now that there's human rights concerns on Guam. The 3 UN special rapporteurs, RAPPORTEURS, rapporteurs. I'm just going to call them reporters because I don't have Frenchie here to help me with the pronunciation. Spanning the issues of indigenous rights, human rights, environment, and toxics, sent a letter to President Joe Biden with multiple inquiries on the Department of Defense activities on island. Well, I have a copy of the letter here. It's funny what you can find online today. And it's on the top of the letter, it says Palais des Nations, 1211, Geneva 10, Switzerland. And then it says mandates of the special rapporteur on issue of human rights, rights obligations relating to the enjoyment of safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, the special reporter on the rights of indigenous people, and the special reporter on the implication for human rights of the environmentally sound management and disposal of hazardous substances and waste. And then it says underneath that, reference AL USA 721, dated 29 January 21. And then the next word is excellency. So when I saw this, I thought it was addressed to me. So I suppose Anumita, or I suppose Julian said that this was sent to the president, but you wouldn't know it from looking at it. We would like to express our serious concern over the U.S. military buildup in the absence of adequate consultation with, quote, as you were, parenthesis, the Chamorro, close parenthesis, people, and the associated threats to indigenous lands, resources, environmental, and cultural rights, the letter stated. Notably, the Chamorro people have not provided their free, prior, and informed consent in connection with the ongoing expansion of U.S. military bases and its accompanying increase in personnel on Guam. Now stop and think about that. So these three reporters, and in a minute I'll once again tell you what a reporter is. These three reporters are saying that the military didn't get the consent of the Chamorro people. So if I took that at face value and I said, yeah, that should have happened, how would it happen? How would you do that? Would you circulate a petition and have every single person on the island who identifies as Chamorro sign off on it? I don't think our government could do it, because this government was created by, the government of Guam was created by guess who? Or guess what? The colonizer. The organic document for our government is a federal statute. So you certainly you wouldn't want to get consent from those folks. But this is what the reporter said. Notably, the Chamorro people have not provided their free, prior, and informed consent in connection with the ongoing expansion of U.S. military bases and its accompanying increase in personnel on Guam. That's absolutely true. It couldn't be truer. But the question is absolutely misleading, because it is negatively pregnant with the idea that this is the way things are always done, right? And of course, I don't know that things are ever done that way. Then Anamita goes on to say the Human Rights Council members, which they're not. Let me just straighten that out for a minute here. Who exactly are the three reporters? I've got their names here. It's three guys, or three folks. And they signed a letter. We've got David R. Boyd, Jose Francisco Calitzai, and Marcos A. Oriana. Those are the three reporters. Writing to the president from Geneva, Switzerland. Now, I got a Wikipedia article here that tells you, I think that would have been available to Anamita also. Appointment authority. Appointed by the Human Rights Council of the UN, these mandate holders, talking about reporters, act independently of governments and as such play an important role in monitoring sovereign nations and democratically elected governments and policies. The earliest such appointment was in 1980, a 1980 working group. The first special reporter responsible for monitoring extrajudicial summary or arbitrary executions began in 1982. His name was Josh Tenorio, who was hired because he used to work at the court. Reporters do not receive any financial compensation for their work from the United Nations, though they receive personnel and logistical support and are often backed by charities and corporations. Each year, reporters gather together for an annual meeting in Geneva where they discuss issues of common interest, coordinate their work, and meet with a range of stakeholders, including states and civil society organizations. Special reporters often conduct fact-finding missions to countries to investigate allegations of human rights violations. Now, here's a really key part of this. They can only visit countries that have agreed to invite them. Yep. Now, when did the United States invite David Boyd, say, hey, David, can you come over to Guam and write nasty things about us? And if it had, do you think that that would have made the news? Do you think that Julian would have made sure that that made the news? The reason it didn't make the news is because it never happened. And the reason that it never happened is that none of this stuff ever happened. It's an elaborate ruse. Aside from fact-finding missions, reporters regularly assess and verify complaints from alleged victims of human rights violations. Once a complainant is verified as legitimate, an urgent letter or appeal is sent to the government that has allegedly committed the violation. If no complaint has been made, reporters may intervene on behalf of individuals, etc. So there you have it. So, and I've got material that I will put on the air tomorrow. It came from Julian Uggen's book that isn't exactly it's not exactly a Jat Haddock, but pretty close to it. Okay, let's head for Churchill Downs.
Sunday brunch at Mezcla Bistro in Hagatna is back.
Come and enjoy Mezcla's true taste of Guam.
At only $28.95, enjoy your Sunday with your friends and family with their free-flowing house mimosa or house draft beer. Open for 2 seatings at 10:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m.
Let Mezcla serve up your favorite local foods. Call them at 479-2652
or 479-2653 to book a reservation. Limited seating available.
Mezcla reminds everyone to be safe and stay sanitized. Sunday brunch at Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Half a day. Patsy Gogri from Security Title with a real estate tip. A power of attorney can be a useful tool when a buyer or seller cannot be present to sign documents, such as a military member deployed overseas. To mitigate its fraudulent use, your escrow officer will contact the seller to make sure they know their property is being sold. When using a power of attorney, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
So here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, getting ready to head down the home stretch for Tall Tales today. I got about 8 more minutes before we get to the finish line, but don't worry, we'll be back tomorrow at 1600. And just glancing at Facebook here, I got a post identified as Mike Eva San Nicolas. And I clicked on it, and it looks like it's from Mike San Nicolas, right, Jose?
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
Take a look.
Okay. Could be the shared account, the wife and husband shared account.
Yeah, I've seen other people do that, but this is what it says. I am a Chamorro, and America gave me free education, hospital care, reason to value life, liberty, and property. Thank you, America. Millions are forever grateful. My sentiments exactly. Okay, so I'm going to put Julian Uggen and his versus the United States aside. I'll bring it back tomorrow with something that looks very much like a smoking gun. But, sometimes you go to a football game, Jose, and it's, about 5 minutes on the clock in the fourth quarter, and your team is behind by about 4 touchdowns, but the parking lot is really, really crowded, and there's going to be a lot of traffic at the end of the game. It's kind of where we are now.
But the smart ones stay behind and wait for the traffic to leave.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. So, with no further ado, another Joe will be given leave to talk about compact impact agreement and mandatory trash collection. So, go for it, another Joe.
Okay, Bob. Before I do that, I can't resist this mob riots that are going on now. How dare they call it mob riots? Right? It's only a small amount of destruction from protests. That's what they were saying during the Trump campaign, right? And they were burning down buildings.
Oh, yeah.
It's only a minimal.
Yeah,
It's only a minimal amount of
peaceful demonstrations. Yeah.
peaceful. There you go. It's not mob riots. So, and then that poor lady cop, is it a white lady cop? Poor lady under pressure. She seemed to have forgotten her left from her right hand, and it just makes you think of that expression. Some people, it's difficult to chew gum and walk at the same time, but it's a terrible experience for everyone, her and everyone. Poor guy. Anyway, so regarding the compact agreements, right? It's interesting because right now here in Guam we're talking about mandatory trash collection. So here's the question: if you've got new arrivals to Guam, and every human being, as far as we know, creates litter. If you buy food, you're going to create possibly a pound of litter a day in wrappers, in drink bottles, cans, whatever you purchase. Then you're responsible for the trash that you make. So the question is, if there are new arrivals, right? Is it considered discriminatory, therefore unconstitutional, to suggest that these new arrivals might need their country, right, the COVID country they arrived from, to be responsible for their citizens, unless they become U.S. citizens, of course. And
they can't become U.S. citizens. Another Joe. We've been through that before.
Okay, apologies.
Yeah.
So they might need assistance from their country to pay for these mandatory trash collection. Or is that considered discriminatory, therefore unconstitutional? And if it's considered discriminatory, Bob, therefore wouldn't it be the same principle, the same standard that is also discriminatory and therefore unconstitutional to require mandatory trash collection for everyone, not just these COFA citizens?
I think you missed the programs when I've talked about the word discriminatory and discrimination.
Okay.
Everything we do in life is discriminatory, right? Drive-through Jack went to Burger King today instead of McDonald's. Does McDonald's have a potential lawsuit against Drive-through Jack? He discriminated. No. And governments, one of the things that governments do, in fact, the major thing that governments do is they discriminate amongst various kinds of classes of people. The key is that in order for discrimination to be something that gets to what you're talking about, it must be invidious discrimination. And I've been through strict scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, and rational government purpose. And if the government creates two classes of people and treats the classes differently, and you could think of a reason to make that discrimination, then that discrimination is not invidious. So what you're saying is I envision this situation where someone comes from the FSM, and when he gets off at the airport, you say, we're going to charge you for 6 months of trash collection before we let you leave the airport. Is that what you had in mind?
I don't know how they'd word it, but they're pushing for mandatory trash collection from every single human being. I don't know how they're going to word it or require it. But
I think it's from every household on Guam. Another Joe. There's a gentleman who is almost identifying an identification for the station out on Marine Corps Drive. He is not going to have to pay for trash collection. And there are some folks living under the bridge down by Bank of Guam who are not going to have to pay for trash collection. But if you have a house, as I understand what the governor's saying, then yeah, you're going to have to pay for trash collection. So we can't talk trash anymore. Another joke as the program's over.
Thanks for talking about it.
All right.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Another night of angry protests. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News, in the Minneapolis suburb of Brooklyn Center over Sunday's police shooting death of a young black man. Fox's Mike Tobin watched as police worked to disperse the crowd.
What you have is these rows and rows of state troopers in the riot gear. They make their announcement. This is an unlawful assembly. Everybody's got to disperse or they're going to be arrested. And then they advance this line. Every time they advance the line, you see the protesters scramble.
When it was over, Colonel Matt Langer of the Minnesota State Patrol saying,
we have upwards of 60 arrests for people that will be booked into the Hennepin County Jail for various charges. And I'd just like to reiterate what other people have said, and I'll say it again. The behaviors that we continue to see are unacceptable, and we are not going to tolerate them.
Colonel Langer says some of the protesters were using mace on police and hurling rocks and bricks at them. Earlier, Kim Potter, the officer who shot Dante Wright, resigned from the force, as did the police chief, Tim Gannon. Charges against Officer Potter could be filed today. The defense has begun its presentation in the murder trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin.
Derek Chauvin's lawyer, Eric Nelson, brought in his own longtime use of force expert, former police officer Barry Broad, who told jurors,
I felt that Derek Chauvin was justified and was acting with objective reasonableness following Minneapolis Police Department policy.
A Minneapolis Park police officer who was on scene of George Floyd's arrest also testifying that the crowd of bystanders grew more loud and aggressive and that he was concerned about officer safety. Floyd's friend, Shawanda Hill, who was subpoenaed by the defense, also told the jury that George Floyd fell asleep, that he wouldn't wake up inside his car before police arrived.
Fox's Jeff Manasso. Additional National Guard troops are being mobilized as closing arguments in the trial should begin next week. America is listening to Fox News.
Jason in the House, the Jason Chaffetz podcast. There is always someone doing something stupid somewhere. Dive deeper than the headlines and the party lines as I take on American life, politics, and entertainment. Join me, Jason Chaffetz, every Wednesday as I shed light on the news and make some predictions along the